be speaking about algae as the unsung, unknown heroes of life on terra firma. Basically, going to be looking at why soil is important first. We need to understand why bother with it at all, and then look at the role of soil algae. What do they do? How do they do it? And I'll try to sum it all up. First, I'd like to propose that we change the session name. Remove that question mark and put an exclamation mark instead. Right? To me, algae are the soil saviors. They are critical to healthy soils. So it's not a question anymore. Okay? We are here talking about something that should be known and widely accepted, but isn't.
The plants that produce fruit and vegetables are rooted in soil. But what exactly is soil? Soil is a living substance containing different elements whose interaction determines the health of the plants it supports. Soil contains minerals such as sand, silt, and clay. The proportion of minerals in the soil determines its texture. It is the organic matter, called humus, that determines the soil's fertility. The humus is constantly being regenerated by the living organisms it contains. Soil is a rich reservoir of microorganisms. The microorganisms facilitate the absorption of carbon in the soil, reducing the polluting effects which contribute to climate change. And by merging with roots, bacteria and fungi, these earthy heroes, protect the plant from disease and provide it with water and all the nutrients it needs. 1 gram of plant-covered soil contains around 1 billion bacteria from between 5,000 and 25,000 species. The other star of the soil is the earthworm, of which there are some 25,000 per hectare. In 1 year, several hundred tons of earth pass through the digestive tract of just a single one of these tireless workers. Worms also create tunnels, which help plants access nutrients and speed up absorption of air and water, which also prevents soil erosion. Soil health has a direct impact on human health, but soil is in danger. The use of pesticides and chemical fertilizers is sterilizing soil and killing living organisms. Deprived of organic nutrients, plants are becoming dependent on chemicals. Their natural defenses are weakened, and they need ever greater amounts of artificial inputs just to survive. Farmers, who have until relatively recently benefited from the free and natural service provided by soil, are in turn at the mercy of chemical inputs. A vicious circle develops, whereby ever greater sums of money are required to buy more and more products. Plants that are deprived of natural nutrients produce fruit and vegetables of inferior quality, which are low in vitamins and essential nutrients. They also contain potentially harmful pesticide residue. Urgent action is needed, and there is a solution. The solution is agroecology. Agroecology respects the soil's natural life cycle. It can also re-inject new life in infertile soils by counteracting the harmful effects of chemicals. How? By feeding the soil with compost, fertilizing it with green manure, practicing crop rotation, and by not harming its underground organisms by digging or ploughing it up. Agroecology allows us to practice a form of agriculture which respects soil life, whilst providing enough healthy, varied, and tasty food for everyone. It is crucial for us to remember that living and healthy soil is good for our health, good for farmers, good for the environment and the climate, and good for the earth.
Right. So everybody has an idea that soil comprises living and non-living components. If you don't have the living components in soil, you have dirt. Okay. Nothing grows in dirt. What is important to soil health? And we talk about water, nutrients, organic matter, organisms, but people don't really understand algae in soils. Okay? It's a missing component. They talk about bacteria and other microbes and earthworms and so on, but the role of algae in soils. Algae are the primary producers in every single ecosystem in which they occur. That's the takeaway from anything you learn today. That's the takeaway. They are the primary producers in any ecosystem in which they occur. Yet our knowledge and understanding of soil algae remains deficient for the most part. Least among microbes are they? They are the least known and the least studied. Humans live in a macro-oriented world. We deal and appreciate what we can see. Our interest in microbes largely focuses on pathogenic microbes, things that can kill us. We don't really talk about beneficial microbes too much. We're now starting to talk about probiotics. And why are we talking about probiotics? Because we've taken too many antibiotics and killed the gut flora in our bodies. But the biome, right, the microbiome in soil is just as important for the health of the planet. And even among beneficial microbes, microalgae, the least studied. And in the study of microalgae, focus largely remains on aquatic species. So you come now to a subset, the soil algae, terrestrial microalgae, that very few people look at. And why? Again, we have a macro focus. But two, it is difficult to study terrestrial algae. Okay, Hoffman in 1989 posited a number of reasons why. That the ecological parameters are difficult to evaluate, that in terrestrial microhabitats, the macro and the mesoclimatic data no longer apply. You're dealing with a completely different and almost alien environment there. And there's high uncertainty in identifying the species. You ask anybody how many different species of algae there are, you'll get anything from 30,000 to 1 million. And it's difficult to observe them in their natural environment. But also, when you try to study them, you use enrichment cultures, which tend to favor the weed species instead of the specialists. So the full gamut isn't really understood. I think we're moving towards that now with like metagenomic studies and so on. But the role of algae in soil ecosystems. This is perhaps one of the most famous images that you will see on the internet if you ever do a Google search for the soil food web. And it starts off with the photosynthesizers. But who are the photosynthesizers in soil? It's not the plants that live on the surface with their roots extending, no. They're the algae. And this is critical for us to understand why certain things work and certain things don't. Look at another one. This is a microscopic look at an algal ecosystem, or a soil ecosystem, sorry. And you'll not see any mention of algae in there. It just seems to be overlooked. But what do they do? Edgar talked about some of this in his presentation, but there's just a whole lot more that we don't understand of the value of living algae in soils. They act as the base of the food web. Captain Paul Watson of the Sea Shepherd, for those of you who are familiar with that, once said that if the oceans die, we die. And I say, if algae in the oceans die, then we die. It's that simple. The oceans are responsible for more than 50% of the photosynthesis that happens on a daily basis. One strain of algae in the oceans, Prochlorococcus, produces more than 20% of that output. We will suffocate before we starve. But the truth is that nobody really looks at how important they are as a primary producer in soil. They secrete substances that protect associated plant root systems from attacks by diseases. They convert nitrogen. They act as a cementing agent and they bind soil particles. The mucilage is hygroscopic, so it helps keep water in the soil. They add organic matter to the soil when they die. Their secondary metabolites help release minerals, for example, phosphorus. Okay. And when you start talking about phosphorus, every chemical nutrient that you find is N, P, and K. The P is usually the smallest component, but it's the most important component. And we talk about peak oil, which I think is nonsense, but peak phosphate is a real issue. Okay. When we run out of phosphate, we're done. Right? And the phosphorus cycle is millions of years, and you can't synthesize phosphate. They oxygenate the soil, which is what we try to do with tilling, which is bad for the soil, and we now know this. They reduce the loss of nitrates through leaching and drainage, especially in uncropped soils. And they weather rocks. They actually are important in building soil in the first place. together with a symbiotic association with fungi, known as lichens, they're the first to colonize bare rock. So the lithosphere is really something that when you have bare rock, how does soil form on that? And what is the role of algae in succession on a lithosphere? And it's very important, they're the ones to start doing it first. They colonize along with other microorganisms, and they actually start creating soil. Biological soil crusts are known to exist and perform very critical functions. They cover the top layer of the soil surface in most arid and semi-arid ecosystems across the globe. And they comprise eukaryotic algae and cyanobacteria. These are just some images, micro images of what they look like in soil and what they do. And these are the types of studies that need to happen for us to understand how they help soil formation and how they keep soil healthy. Here's a landscape with healthy soil crusts and more images of a cyanobacterial sheath holding sand grains together. And I hope that the young lady doing the research there will become familiar with a lot of this as she goes along. Yeah. Right. Budell in 2002 published on the diversity and biology of biological crust and the role of the different types of algae in these formations. But soil is about the ecology of soil. It's a holistic look at what they comprise and how algae affects the soil physical and chemical properties as well. So the use of microscopic algae as a green manure is, according to Painter, the only realistic hope of halting and reversing desert encroachment. And this was from a study he did in the Sahel. But it is so important that you can use these organisms to revitalize soils that have gone dead. Then we have to look at the role of algae in global biogeochemical cycles. They play a part in every single major biogeochemical cycle. The phosphorus cycle, the nitrogen cycle, silicon, sulfur, oxygen and carbon, and the water cycle, believe it or not. Okay. Understanding the role of algae in our planet, in our ecosystems, is critical to beginning to understand what you need to study, what you need to learn and understand about them. The water cycle. How many people understand that algae in the oceans produce DMS, dimethyl sulfide? Well, it's actually DMSP, but those molecules are cloud condensation nuclei, and they are critical in the formation of clouds out at sea. So they play a role in the water cycle. So the conclusion here, algae play a critical role in soil formation and soil reformation. They continue to be significant contributors as primary producers in soil. They function in all the major planetary biogeochemical cycles. They benefit soils in physical, chemical, and biological processes. They support soil ecosystems, so the heterotrophs in soil and the plants that grow in the soil. Essentially, if you take algae out of soil, you have to keep adding chemical nutrients to support the rest of the ecosystem that can't produce the glucose for themselves. It's that simple. But much more research is necessary to understand how algae benefit the soil ecosystem. A lot of this is deduction. It is, trying to figure out what really happens in the soil. But nobody has focused on the most important organisms that occur in soil. What they help to create, they can help to save. It's that simple. My closing thought for you is this. In the game of ecosystem Jenga, if there ever was such a game, and we're playing it right now on a global scale. Right? Algae are the base. You remove them, everything else collapses. It's that simple. And that's how important this is. And it's not just for soil, it's for everything else. Healthy soils equal healthy ecosystems equal healthy humans. But I go one step further. Healthy algae in soils equal healthy ecosystems, equal healthy humans. So thank you very much. That's my presentation. I do have quite a few references